And we're live.
Yay!
Woo! My voice is kind of shot from a holiday party that involved a lot of screaming, so I apologize that I sound like, I don't know.
That's right.
I sound like I've done a lot of screaming lately, which is true. So hi, I am Callie. My pronouns are they, them, and Nikki, you are muted. We can't hear you. Now you're tech problem.
There we go.
There
so literally my AirPods died. I thought they were charged. They were not. So my AirPods just died. So it does the like default where it goes to the laptop audio.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And of course, then it like doesn't. Anyway, hi everyone. So I'm Nikki, and I miss all of you. Callie, I miss you, friends.
Yes.
I know. I've been busy. Hey, somebody has to hold down the fort while all of you go have fun. I'm just saying.
That's true. We've all been working very hard in our various ways. So we're going to talk about 3D printing today.
Okay.
I got a 3D printer towards the beginning of the pandemic as a hobby, as like it was on sale. It wasn't that expensive. I think it was like $150.
Well, that's not bad.
Yeah, like it's not nothing. Obviously, like $150 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I could swing it for a hobby thing, and something I've kind of wanted to do for a while. Like making props is cool, having like phasers and tricorders and all that kind of stuff. And so I got into 3D printing specifically so I could make Star Trek props.
Pretty much. I mean, I think we're always jealous whenever Randy is like, so I made this new thing, and we're like, it's just cool.
Yes, exactly.
I want to make the things.
Well, it is deeply satisfying in a really like philosophical, metaphysical kind of way. Like that is like way outside of the scope of this presentation, but I'll just say, like, starting with like a lump of plastic and it ending up with as a phaser, there's just something that feels very powerful about that. I don't know if that's like a pathology. I don't know if I need to like talk to my therapist about that. Like, I'm not sure. Hello, Linda. I see you. Thank you for joining. So what we are going to do is kind of go through the process of a 3D print, mostly from start to finish. There are a ton of different ways that you can do this.
Okay.
You can do your own 3D designs. I'm not going to do that. So the process that we're going to go through here is about just like finding a design on the internet that you want to print and finishing it. Now, originally, the plan was going to be for me to print like 4 or 5 of a thing and then like show it at various stages of being finished, but the prints failed as a thing. That's a thing that happens sometimes. But we're still gonna, oh yeah, DJ Kitty Cat, I see you. We got, that's definitely something I'm going to go over.
Yeah.
So let's say, let's say we want to print a T88. Everybody remembers the T88, right? From Lower Decks.
If you haven't watched Lower Decks, tool. We highly recommend it. It's hilarious. I don't know. It gives laughter and fun to the world of Trek in only the way fans can. Like, I have to say this because I was having this conversation recently at a holiday party with somebody where I was like, look, no one like the fans can sort of make fun of their show like the fans can. And when other people try to make fun of the show, you just like are like, no, do not make fun of my show. Only I can make fun of my show. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what Lower Decks does, but in such a great way that I know people that don't understand or have never watched the show before. And so they don't always know all the like deep cuts, but they're funny. Like the show itself is funny. So that was my plug for Lower Decks.
One day I will do a convention talk about how Lower Decks doesn't get enough credit for being real Star Trek. Even among people who love it, I feel like it's dismissed as like the comedy show or the funny show, but it has depth that I don't see a lot of people talking about. Anyways, that's not what we're
no, sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay, so TV8s for Lower Decks, yeah.
Yes.
The really cool this is scannery things.
Yes, the very cool scannery thingy that apparently can be used to do medical or engineering scans, which is why Tendy and Rutherford were fighting over it. Excuse me. So one of the best places to find things to print if you don't know 3D modeling yourself, which is it's its own skill set. I'm learning it and it's a lot. But thankfully, like most things that you would want to make as a Star Trek fan, you can find other people have made models for to print. And so the T88 is very fun. This site is called Thingiverse. Just thingiverse.com, and it has just, I mean, tons of things, almost anything that you could think of to want to print, Star Trek related, even practical stuff, pencil holders, like headphone stands, all of that stuff. It's all there. It's great. But say let's, we want to print this. We want to print this T88, right? So I found this file here, and it's, you search just like anything else. You search T88.
Do they like tag? Can you just do Star Trek and a bunch of?
Oh yeah, if you search for Star Trek on Thingiverse, there are tons of things that come up.
Okay, great. That's super helpful, I think.
There's a Horgon. We love that, right?
Yes.
Seeking Jamaharon. And when you find the thing that you want, you go to download, and it'll download a zip file to your computer.
And we'll give you an ad for Amazon.
Of course, because the site is free, they need to make money somehow. There's ads. It's a whole thing.
That's good. That should have been a question. Is it free?
Yeah. Alexa was letting me know I had a thing on my calendar. Nice. There's a site called Cults 3D that has some free stuff, but some stuff you can pay for as well. Some designs that you can pay for. Which I have also done. There's some really cool stuff there. And actually, I will show you a model that I made from a thing on Cults 3D later.
Okay.
And so when you download it, you get, it's just called an STL generically. And that's just a file type for a 3D model. Okay. And when you're 3D printing, the first thing that you want to do is slice it. And the reason they call it slicing, let me get rid of this.
Seems super complicated. It doesn't. I'm used to Photoshop, so I'm sure that this isn't crazy, but I feel like someone who's never used Photoshop before, this might, or anything like that, might be a little. So you can just drag and drop. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't know if it's quite drag and drop on Windows. I'm not sure if it has that same functionality, but yeah. And so you load your STL. This program is called a slicer. And
does this come with your, does the program come with your printer?
No, this is free, actually. Cura, this is probably the most popular slicing program. It's free. There are others that you can pay for. To be honest, I don't know a lot about them because I've never run into something that I wanted to do that I couldn't with Cura. Okay. This is really the only program that I know for that. And so the reason they call it a slicer, let's learn a little bit about how 3D printing itself works. Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you buy your printer, then what happens?
So this is a picture of a 3D printer, and this is specifically a picture of the printer that I have. It's called the Ender 3. The company is Creality. This is probably the most popular starter 3D printer. And everything that all of the examples that I'm going to show you that I've printed in a minute, I printed on that printer. There's a lot of things that you have to do to mess with it to dial it in, but you can get really quality prints even with this just kind of basic printer. And so you can see my mouse on the screen here. It's not super big, but you can kind of see where I'm going here. So in this type of 3D printing, they use what's called filament, right? And filament is just a thin plastic string that comes in a roll, and
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yep. And you put that roll here, and then it gets fed through this little piece right here. And behind this support, there's a mechanism that pushes the filament through or pulls it back.
Okay.
And that's how the printer decides how much filament to use.
Got it.
It goes through this tube into the extruder, into the hot end,
I was gonna say that heats it up. Yep.
Yeah. So this heats up to depending on the kind of material that you're using, it can go 200 degrees Celsius or higher. And basically the filament gets melted to the point where it's not liquid, but it's very pliable, and it gets smushed in layers to build the print in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
And so somebody talked about layer lines, and that's why it gets laid down in layer, like a very precise hot glue gun. Yes, actually, that's a really good way to put that. That is a really good metaphor for that, actually. And so the reason that this software is called a slicer is that when you tell it to slice, it creates a set of instructions for the 3D printer.
Okay.
Right? So we'll just hit the slice button and I'll show you what it does.
Okay.
You go to preview, and now it shows you everything that the printer is going to do.
Oh, nice.
And so this is telling you there's 475 layers.
Whoa.
In this, and you can pull it down. So you can see in this program, if I can get it to zoom, there we go. You can see in this program exactly what each layer looks like. And
the honeycomb interior or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. That's called infill, and that's just providing support inside the print so it doesn't collapse.
Okay. I've seen that.
Yeah. And so this is a relatively simple model. It's not super complicated. And so there's not a ton to watch out here for. But if you have a complicated model, this can really tell you where problems might crop up in your print. So
if you have different components or different parts, or
so for example, you see this little blue stuff under here.
Yeah.
So that's called support.
Okay.
And the reason that's needed is, so if you think about, if you're printing on this corner, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing underneath this. And so if you're not printing directly on top of the layer below, if you go at too extreme of an angle, it's just going to fall over.
Oh, right. Because it's basically a hot glue gun.
Yes, exactly. And so this stuff here gives it a base to sit upon. Okay. Right. So it will print on top of this. So and then you just remove it when it's done.
Yeah.
Let me find a model that requires a lot of support so you can get DJ Kitty Cat. No, this model does not do dual extrusion, where you can do multiple colors of filament at the same time. It does not do that. Which I can't think of a time where I've really, really needed that.
Yeah, because I know most people usually just paint or color it however they want on top of the plain color, typically, right? So when you get your printer, like, does it have instructions like, hey, you need to download this app and this thing? Okay, that's good. And then what about, like, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but like, where do you purchase the filament itself? Are there
is
it only online? Can you go to, can you go to Michael? I don't think you can go to like Michael's craft store, but like
Micro Center, if you have a Micro Center locally, Micro Center carries filament. To be honest, I've had mixed experiences with the filament they sell. I use filament from a company called Hatchbox. Their stuff has always been quality and it's pretty reasonably priced. I've not had any problems with it. So that's my personal recommendation. That's what I've always had the best luck with. And actually, when I get to showing the example prints later on, all of it will have been done with Hatchbox filament. Okay, so back to the topic of support. So this is a model for the Lower Decks Purple Stripe tricorder.
Oh yeah.
And this is the control pad, right? And so if we're going to print it this way, knowing what you know about how a 3D printer works, you can see printing this part here would be a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't just extrude that filament in the air, it won't stay.
Right.
And so when you slice it, the slicer is smart enough to know that it needs to put support there. And so, excuse me, when you go to the preview, you'll see that it's printing support there. And sometimes it doesn't get it right 100% of the time where support needs to go, because it's basically just doing really complicated math based on the angles there.
Yeah.
I will say in printing props, I've not really had much of a problem with it. Where it often becomes a problem is if you're printing like figures with like arms and legs sticking out and stuff, like that can get sort of complicated in figuring out where the supports need to go.
Okay.
But if you're just printing props, like I said, I can't think of a time I've had a problem with the software getting support wrong.
Okay.
It's always been, but that's why it's always important to look at your preview when you slice it, so you can see exactly what it's going to do.
Now, if it didn't give the support, can you manually go in and say, no, you need to add?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can manually add and remove support if you don't think it'll need it. To be honest, I don't fully know how to do that because it's not a thing that I've never had to do for prop making.
Right.
But when you're slicing, there's like a million different settings that you can play with. And going through every single one of these is probably out of the scope of this this bit, but
just like and say, show me what to do.
yeah. YouTube tutorials are great. But honestly, I don't stray much from the standard quality 0.2 millimeter profile in Cura. I don't often change much. If I'm using like for a phaser rifle that I know I'm going to be carrying around a bunch, I might print extra walls so the outside of it's a little stronger. I might make the infill a little bit more. And infill again is the bits that print inside to support it so the print doesn't collapse.
Right.
If it's just something for display, sometimes you can get away with like 5% or 10%. And if you want it to be a little bit more substantial and be a little bit more strong, you can up that. And it's just you just got to play with it to figure out what feels right. There's no like, this situation, this is the correct thing at all times.
Right.
And here's support. You can tell it to generate support or not. Obviously, not every model needs it.
Yeah. When you download like your thing from Thingiverse, do some of them have like recommendations, like your specs?
Yes.
Like
yeah. Cool. Yeah. If you look, so we'll go back to the T88 model here. This one doesn't have it. There's a lot of things on Thingiverse will actually tell you, the person who made it will tell you like, here's the printer I used, here's all the settings that I used in that printer to get a successful print. And you'll even see some of them, the space here where it says makes. Yeah. If you make a thing from this, you can actually go back to Thingiverse and say like, hey, I made your model. Here's a picture of it. Here's the settings I use and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, that's really cool. And it can be helpful if you're printing something that's difficult. I've done some hard prints where I've actually relied on that a little bit to get a successful print. So yeah. It's very, very cool. And so once you have done the slice, well, let me load the T88 back in here.
All the 500 or 400 and whatever layers it was.
476 or something like that. Which is, that's this print is, this model, if we don't.
So you switch the orientation. Is that important?
It can be, yeah. So if you think about what we were talking about in support,
yes,
sometimes you can do an orientation that forces the printer to print more support than you actually have to. If you would just change the orientation of the model, you can use less filament.
Okay.
The files will list how much filament they should take to print. Okay, seal 0626. No, they don't actually, because that entirely depends on the settings that you use in your slicer. So there's no way to know that just based on the file. But when you're in the slicer here in Cura, once you do all your settings, you hit slice, it'll do all its calculations, and then it will spit a number out for you that it estimates it will use 33 grams of filament or 10.91 meters of filament. I will say, in my experience, the time estimate in Cura is usually wrong. This is pretty close to right. In terms of how much
the time is wrong. Does it take longer or does it take less time?
Usually it's not quite as long.
Okay.
But so doing the orientation, that's a really good question. So you see, as it is now,
Yeah.
In Cura, the red shows you where it thinks it needs support.
Okay.
So if I turn this over, all of a sudden, basically the entire bottom needs support because of the angles and because of the way that it sits on the build plate.
Got it. Yep.
And then the other thing to think about too is after we get through this part, we're going to talk about finishing a 3D print and like making it look really nice and shiny. Yep. Usually where support is, there's a little bit of extra work to make it look good on the outside because you have to use little like plastic cutters to cut the support off, or you just kind of pull it off, and it leaves little nubs behind that you have to like sand down and make smooth. Yeah. And so like from the perspective of finishing a print, using less support is good in terms of like how easy it is to make it look good, and it uses less filament and therefore costs less money.
That's nice.
Yeah. So once we slice,
yay, and our 400 whatever.
Yes.
We're in our layers.
And it generates what's called G code. Okay. And G code is literally the set of instructions that tells the 3D printer what to do. Okay. You know, move the extruder in, or move the hot end in this shape, dispense this much filament, then move, then go to the layer, all of that. And then there's a couple of different ways that you can actually get something to a 3D printer to print. A lot of times you just load it on an SD card. The G code, you load on an SD card, and there's a little slot on the printer that you put in, and you use the front control panel on the printer to like navigate the print and tell it to go.
Okay.
What I have is something called Octoprint.
Nice.
This is a really cool thing you can remote control your prints with.
Yay! Yeah, that's much easier.
What?
I said I feel like that's much easier.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's also cool because like I can look at this remotely. And so like if I'm at the grocery store and I see a print is failing, I can stop it instead of having it waste a bunch of filament. And so, you know, an important thing to know about the G code, right, is that like different filaments require different settings a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And that can include like variables of temperature and all of that. Okay. And all of that is set up in the slicer. You can tell it what temperature you want to print at, what temperature you want the bed to be at. And so this is actually G code instructions being sent and received.
Actual code. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Looks like actual code. Yeah.
Yeah. And did it just freeze? I hope it didn't freeze. Okay, no, it just needed a second. And so this is like what you're seeing right now is a live feed of my 3D printer in operation. I am printing a thing. I won't say what because it's a Christmas present for someone. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but it is actively printing right now. And so like if you look in the left, there's red filament being fed through the hot end, and it's laying down layers.
Nice
thing. So yeah, so that is a overview of how to get something from the computer to a 3D printer and get it going. Important notes about this. Don't ever get emotionally invested into a print until you have it off of the build plate and finished, because they will fail for silly reasons. It takes some time to get your settings dialed in correctly. Yeah. It takes some time to so you see the bed moving back and forth. You see the hot end. Those are on belts that you have to adjust the tension on. Wow. You see these little dials down here. Yeah. That's how you keep the bed level and adjust the distance of the bed from the hot end. And that affects how the print turns out. And so there's like a lot of playing around with this sort of stuff that you need to do before you can start getting solid quality prints. Yeah. And so patience is a must. Like you got to be patient. Don't get super excited the first time you hit 3D print that it's going to come out beautifully looking. It's not impossible. If you watch enough YouTube videos and you like really get it dialed in, it's a thing that can happen, but I would not get emotionally invested in that outcome.
Got it. Yeah. It's not a quick, like turn on, ready to go. It's a adjust the settings and everything.
And so at the end of a 3D printing process, you might end up with something like this.
Ooh, a hypo spray.
A hypo spray. All right, I'm gonna pull my camera forward so you can see. So you can see this is an almost entirely unfinished print. I haven't really done much with it. You can see the layer lines there. Somebody in the chat was talking about the layer lines. And that's just a byproduct of the fact that, like, you know, the physics aren't 100% perfect. Even the best print is going to have some visible layer lines. And that's just a byproduct of the medium.
Yeah.
So you can probably
did you do two different things, or did you already paint?
No, so the outside here, this is painted. But the rest
black, whatever.
Yeah, but the rest is just different colored filament.
Oh, so did you do it in pieces, or because you said you couldn't do one, you can do two or many at
exactly. So you can see where they're glued together. The shaft here is apart, the head here is apart, where the medicine comes out is apart, and where the button comes out is apart. They're all separate parts, and I glued them together.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And because this was not super important to the cosplay that I was doing, I didn't put a ton of effort into finishing it. But that's good because it makes it a good example for using here. And so how do we get rid of these layer lines? That's the answer to that question is sanding. It's a pain in the ass, but it's sanding. And honestly, there are a bunch of different ways to do it depending on how meticulous you want to go. The way that I normally do it, I have a little like triangle, like Ryobi sanding thing.
I'm assuming you're going to want like super fine finishing sanding paper or whatever.
No, at first you start with super coarse sandpaper. And you do it in stages. Okay. So to get rid of like the super obvious layer lines, I usually use like a 60 grit or an 80 grit. Okay. And you run all over it until and then like use a paper towel or something to get the dust off until most of the layer lines are gone.
Okay. Does that also help with like leftover filler, the leftover support?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's how you knock all of that down. And then you just kind of do that process over and over again with progressively finer sandpaper. And then so usually from there, I'll go to like 150 grit, and that kind of smooths out the remaining like dust and stuff and starts to make it actually look a little smooth on the outside. And then down to like a 400, 800, 1200, just kind of depending on how like fine you want to get it before you start priming and painting. And so I will show you, so this is a purple stripe tricorder that I finished. So the thing that you will notice about this is one of the first things that I printed before I learned a whole lot about stuff. And so you can see that I painted and finished this without doing any sanding. So the layer lines are still pretty visible.
Yeah.
But because I used a ton of primer and paint on it, the layer lines are not visible unless you look super close.
Yeah.
And so even that is like, you know, if you want to be super meticulous, you can be super meticulous and make it look great. But you also
sounds like it's like 12,000 extra steps. But yes, you can. How much time do you want to spend? That's
yeah. And so like this is, you know, I use some tape to tape off for the purple stripe, and I use tape to tape off for the buttons.
Nice. You're missing
the
power cell. Don't forget the power cell.
Of course. But like to have a thing to put on a uniform that looks cool, it does. You don't have to spend a ton of time doing the finishing, just depending on the context, right? Just like this hypo spray was part of a cosplay that I did for Tendi from Strange Energies Lower Decks, where she's got the sash full of hypo sprays and the medical shotgun.
Oh, nice.
I did that cosplay. And so this was in like a bandolier of hypo sprays. And so nobody was looking super closely at it, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, so you don't have to go to all of that because it is a ton of work.
Yeah.
And it's like I have carpal tunnel, and so sanding is not super great for me. But like, you know, you want to make a prop, it's a thing.
We have a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions from anybody in the audience that is here? Which thank you for joining us.
Wait, we have an hour, I thought.
Oh, we have an hour? Oh,
yeah, the next thing doesn't start until 1:30 my time. Yeah.
Well, our whole 30, like starting at the 30 mark, that messed me up. Okay, yeah, it's been great. I can like hold on. That was something that fell.
Doing all right over there?
I'm good. No, I'm totally good. It's like a cardboard roll it was from wrapping paper.
Heck yeah.
Oh, okay. Now what? Okay, great.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So more things about finishing. I will let's see, what should I show off? I have a ton of things here to show off that I'm very excited
Okay, great.
So let's see. I will show off. Well, speaking of the medical shotgun costume, this is actually, so we didn't go over 3D modeling because that's a whole other process that I could do hours and hours and hours on, and I'm still only kind of intermediate at it myself. I don't know that I feel comfortable teaching it, but the first so the hypospray, this hypospray model, I did make the 3D model for it myself. Computer stop. I should have turned that off before we started going, but it's also fun to just
more entertaining when there's random stuff happening.
Yeah.
Like I'm just waiting for the cars because I live on a corner, waiting for like cars to start honking and everybody hears it.
Right. But yeah, so this I 3D modeled because if you look on Thingiverse, there are hypospray props, but they're all like the Voyager TNG ones that have a lot of details on them. And the Lower Deck one obviously doesn't because it's a cartoon and it's Lower Decks and it's simple. So I made this to print. But my first
can I ask, like, how did you use Photoshop? Did you use
There's a program called Blender.
Oh.
That I learned how to use. And basically you just generate shapes and mess with shapes. It's cool. If we've got some extra time at the end, I'll pull it up and show around a little bit. But this is the first big scale thing that I modeled myself.
Yes.
So I made this model from start to finish. This is the medical shotgun from Lower Decks.
I feel like it's not an actual shotgun and it's really just a trank gun. Like, did they ever tell us? I don't remember.
It is in the script. It is called a medical shotgun. I looked it up.
Right. But what is it shooting? Like, that's why I feel
medicine. Like it's a shotgun. It's a shotgun that does what a hypospray does, except with ammunition.
This is why I'm like, I feel like it's more of a tranquilizer.
But a couple of things to think about here. So you saw my printer earlier. This is obviously way bigger than anything my printer can do on its own. And so this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces.
Whoa.
7 different pieces that I printed separately from each other and then attached together. And I don't know if you can see it on camera. It's not like glaringly obvious, but you can kind of see the lines where things are attached. I also wasn't the most
from far away when you hold it back towards you, you can't really tell some of them. Like I could figure out that, like, yes, the one piece on top would be a separate piece. The handle up front on the bottom would be a separate piece. That back handle, no, I couldn't until you showed it, like, way up.
Yeah. And so, and I also wasn't super patient with the paint job on this because I was kind of in a hurry. So you can see where some of the paint has run and some of the lacquer has run. But basically the process for all of this is anything that's going to be the same color, you just like super glue together, wait for it to dry. And then the sanding process that I talked about is kind of the same, right? You just take rough grit sanding paper, sand it all down, make it all smooth, go progressively smoother. And then you hit it with primer, let the primer dry, sand that down smooth, and you just kind of repeat that process over and over and over again until it looks smooth and you can actually put paint on it. I used a vinyl cutter to cut out this logo here.
I was going to ask, if that was vinyl or paint.
Yep. I used a vinyl cutter for it. And then I just did the whole thing with lacquer, with a lacquer over top so the label will stay on. I will also show, so that T88 model, this is what a finished one of those looks like.
Yes.
This one was really difficult because I taped off all of the little bits to paint, which from a distance, it looks fine. If you look up close, you can see pretty obviously that's what's happened. So you can see, and this was also like pretty early on. So you can see some spots where the details aren't that great, but in a holster on a uniform, it still looks cool. And I get tons of compliments on it. And it's,
Of course.
Some other large scale prints. This is obviously the DS9 phaser rifle that you see throughout most of the Dominion War.
Yeah.
Well,
no way! You totally. That's so cool. Okay, so what did you use for the site?
Okay, so
the little green piece in there.
Yes, so all of this is 3D printed, except this. This is just a little piece of a green acrylic.
Nice.
That I belong to a makerspace, and they have a laser cutter, and so I just cut the acrylic out with the laser, and then cut the site into the acrylic with the laser.
That's cool.
Yeah, but everything else is 3D printed and finished and sanded and painted and everything, just like the process that we had talked about before.
How many pieces was that to make?
This one, if I remember correctly, there are 28 separate pieces.
Oh my goodness!
On this,
that's a lot.
Well, so they're obviously like the pieces that are the different color, you can tell, but like both handles, there's the trigger piece, the thing on the sides, the handles, the little power pack thing, the buttons on the top, the cover here, the front piece. Yeah. And then the Big Daddy, this is probably the biggest scale print that I've ever done.
What?
This is
oh my goodness. I don't think I've seen that. I don't think I've seen you.
I sent pictures of it to our group chat.
Yeah, but sometimes that group chat goes so fast that I'm like, I can't scroll back up.
That's true. That's true. So this is the Nemesis style phaser rifle. This took like a solid 2 weeks worth of 3D printing, because some of these pieces are gigantic. But this is still, I want to say there are 30 some pieces in this. So a lot of this detail is this is a separate piece, the top here, both sides, the handle, the bottom part here is 2 different pieces. This is all separate, the scope, the little sight.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
is it heavy?
A little bit. This is part of the reason this took so long is because remember when I said I would go in and I would make extra walls if I wanted something to be thicker. So I printed all of this with a little extra infill and a little bit thicker walls. So it would be, so I can carry it around a con and not worry about if I drop it, it's not going to break.
Right.
So yeah, the weight of this is actually pretty substantial. And then, and it's all painted and lacquered and put together.
That's
another cool thing that
because there weren't enough cool things, you have more.
I've designed lighting fixtures that I have 3D printed that are Star Trek-esque, and so
oh, nice, like sconces.
Yeah, sconce. That's the word. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's like a wall.
Yes. And so the idea is, if you think about the conference rooms on Voyager, that's like the conference rooms on Voyager and the Enterprise E. This isn't I wasn't trying to design specifically what was there, but it was kind of that idea.
Yeah.
And I put these in, and I designed ends to go on them as well. And so once it goes on the wall, it'll have
that's
this on top and bottom.
Cool.
Now it'll have LEDs in the middle that light up.
I was just gonna say, it's plastic. If you put a light in there, is it gonna melt?
They're LEDs, so they generate a little bit of heat, but not a lot.
That's good. Well, now I'm as I watch the show, I'm gonna be like, all the stuff in the background. Callie, can you make this?
That is exactly what when I after I got my 3D printer, because I'm in a perpetual state of Star Trek rewatch anyways, right? I just never stopped watching Star Trek. And once I knew a little bit about 3D printing, I immediately started thinking about all the little medical gadgets that you only ever see on screen once.
You have to make sickbay jars. You have to make sickbay jars.
Sickbay jars with the table and the liquid. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
They do nothing until randomly pieces of human flesh go into them. Because they weren't weird enough.
Right. Yes. So yeah, that's really it. Do we have questions in the chat? I will say most of this I learned from watching different YouTube tutorials.
Oh, this
there
is
aren't
hilarious. The medical jars and fill them with M&Ms. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Stuff from Enterprise. Yeah, there's tons of models for Enterprise on Thingiverse. I'm less of an like I love Enterprise, but it's less of my favorite, and so I have not really done anything from Enterprise. But I know the I've seen models for the Enterprise Phaser, the Enterprise Tricorder, a bunch of other stuff. I know there's tons of Enterprise props on Thingiverse.
Yeah.
But yeah, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise E, like TNG movie era. That's kind of my favorite era of props.
Can we check on your printer? Because I can kind of see.
Oh, yeah.
Like where it's at. Ooh. See, you can actually like really see it starting to.
Yep. It's hypnotizing, honestly. Like I will sometimes just load my 3D printer stream and just like watch it while I'm listening to music or something like that. That's it may seem weird, but that's just
no, I can see how this would be. It just goes.
Yeah. And it's fun to watch it take shape. Like it moves just fast enough that you can see the progress, but slow enough that it's like you really got to watch it to see what's happening. Well, since we've got like 20 minutes left, if people are watching, you want to throw questions in the chat, feel free. But you were asking earlier about the program that I use for modeling.
Yes, because I feel like I'm sure Thingiverse and many Trekkies have like done like you've done, which is where it's like, let's watch everything in the background and then pull the thing out and then make the thing and whatever. But there could be that one random thing that no one else has made, and how.
That's why I made the medical shotgun, because I really wanted to do that cosplay. Yeah, but it really is, a Blender is a very deep program, and it's about 6 times deeper than it needs to be for using it to build 3D models, but it's great. You were wondering, Seal0626, the platform moved or the nozzle did. And that's not universal. Like there are printers that are built in different ways. There are some printers where the platform starts at the top and the platform moves as opposed to the nozzle moving vertically. There's a ton of different designs. I would say the way that my printer works is probably the more common of them, but certainly not the only way.
And I've seen different printers and different sizes of printers. Is there, especially if it's like somebody's just starting, is there a recommendation to go smaller than bigger? Like I feel like if you went bigger, then just more things could go wrong.
I really think the Ender 3 V2, the one that I have, is really, really great as a starter 3D printer. Like it's big enough that you can print most things you would want to, but simple enough that you can spend some time dialing it in and get some quality prints with a minimum of frustration. I really think that in terms of, and I think at regular price, they're like $189. One of the other types, yes, I have a resin printer as well. And resin printing is a whole other thing, but basically it's resin that's photosensitive, and the printer uses light to freeze the resin in layers, and the prints. Basically, the printers are a lot more expensive for the space that you get. The one that I have is relatively small, and it was still more expensive.
The resin printer, that's what I think the tokens that we had at Vegas weren't the Ranger tokens were resin.
Yep. And let me see. I don't have any of my resin prints handy here, but basically, I mean, resin is it still has kind of visible layer lines, but the layer lines are a lot less visible. A little easier to dial in, a little bit less pleasant environmentally. It creates a smell that's not that great. My wife complains about when I have a resin print going. But yeah, resin printing is great. It's just you have to pay more to have less print size, but it is a bit, you can get more detailed with it because you can work at a little bit more of a granular level with it. But Blender, yeah, this is a program for use 3D printing in any way to make alien makeup appliances. Absolutely, that is a thing people do. You can do 3D prints to do. I've seen people do them for plastic molds for like visors for helmets. So you 3D print the shape of the visor, and then you can like vacuum form plastic around it or heat form plastic around it to create a visor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a thing that you can do. It's just, again, like there's still the layer lines thing. And so that will kind of transfer with, if you're using it like
Oh,
silicone.
yeah.
And I would definitely look at like the materials that you're using and see if, because the PLA filament that all of this stuff is made out of is not super strong plastic. Like it'll probably melt. Like if you would leave it in a hot car in the summer, it will probably melt. So you want to be careful with that. And it's not the strongest. Like if you drop it, it can break. Like,
so there's difference in filaments.
Yeah. There's different kinds of material. ABS is the strongest, but ABS is also kind of a pain in the ass to print with sometimes. Because
you have to have a higher temperature, right? Then
yes, and it's also more sensitive to temperature difference. So what can happen with an ABS print is when it prints, as it cools, the plastic will shrink and it'll deform. And so you have to be really careful to keep a steady temperature in your printing area if you're using ABS. And then there's PLA plus, there's PETG, there's a whole bunch of different kinds. There's some really great videos on YouTube. They're like 30 minutes long that just explains all the different kinds of filaments. I usually just use PLA because most of my props are for like hanging on the wall or carrying around a convention. And so they don't need to be like super mega durable.
Yeah.
So there's that. So Blender's cool. And for 3D modeling, like at its simplest, you're really just like building shapes and modifying shapes to create objects, right?
Okay.
And so like, let's say, for example, I want to do something kind of simple. So let's say like, I want to do the front section of this shotgun here, right? Okay. Yeah. So you can see like, it's really like, it's a rectangle that's slightly turned and like the corners are modded a little bit.
Parallelogram.
Yeah. And so
a random thing I remember from math class.
And so, you start with a cube. And, a full-on Blender tutorial is way, like, we definitely don't have time for that. Yeah. But you can nice. You can manipulate shapes based on the face or based on the edge or the point. Nice. Vertex, edge, or face. And then and you can see like I've already got kind of a rectangular shape going on, and then I can
nice.
And then if I want to round the end, you create that bevel.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, you just add little cylinders for the front.
Nice.
And that's how you do it. It can be a pretty tedious process.
Yeah.
But it's pretty rewarding. It's real neat. I've started working on a bunch of different things. I even I'm not going to give away my secret. There's a very special cosplay that I'm planning for the convention in Chicago, and I 3D modeled something for the cosplay. That's all I'll say.
So excited. Oh, we should talk about, we will be at, or at least some of us will be at Gallifrey 1. So anybody who's watching that is in the SoCal area, Gallifrey 1 is in February at the Marriott near the LAX. I think it's the Marriott. I want to make sure. Hold on. I'm pretty sure Stephanie made sure to put it in our chat so we would get it right. And I may or may not have gotten it wrong. Nope.
While you're looking that up, Seal0626 is curious, what is my favorite thing that I've printed? And the answer is definitely this, the medical shotgun. Because it's a large scale prop that I made the 3D model for. And so start to finish, I did all of this. It was very, very frustrating, but I learned a lot. And it just pings a very special kind of nerdy thing in my brain that like this is a prop that exists in like 2 minutes of a single Star Trek episode.
Yeah.
But it's just like so ridiculous and fun. So like being able to see this from start to finish, knowing that like I started making this out of cubes in 3D modeling, and now it's something that exists in the real world. There's just something real special about that for me.
Have you put it on Thingiverse?
I have not, because there are things about the model that I need to fix.
Oh.
But I'm definitely going to. I'm definitely going to. There's a very big like open source like sharing kind of spirit.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in doing any of this for money anyways. Like it's a very fun like community fandom thing for me. And so I definitely want to share the design, but I want to share it after I fix a couple of silly mistakes that I made. Aside from that, it's probably this phaser rifle. Just because the Dominion War is like my favorite arc of Star Trek, pretty much. And this is the phaser that we see in DS9 fighting the Dominion most times. And so putting this together was very fun and very rewarding. And also I didn't have to do the 3D model for it. So that was because this is a very meticulous and well-made model. The person who did it obviously knows what the hell they're doing, and it's very impressive. So yeah, this is probably, and then also the other thing, Nikki, vamp for a second. I'm going to show off another cool
thing. So Gallifrey 1, which it is a Doctor Who convention, but we will be there. So it's in anybody who's in Southern California, February 18th through the 20th, and it is at the Marriott near LAX. So we will be there. Stay tuned on our socials for more information. I am pretty sure we will have some 3D printed stuff. I don't know what yet, but I know, I'm sure Randy will make some more fun things. I believe Steph is coming out. Yay. And if work permits, I will try to make an appearance because I miss everyone and want to say hi. And we are slowly shifting to look at something. What are we looking at?
Okay. So first of all, I have this.
Oh,
gold press latinum.
Nice.
Bars of gold press latinum. But also you see see my warp core in the background.
That's right. I remember the warp core, and I'm waiting because I know it does a thing. It does a thing.
It does a thing.
Everyone, it does a thing. Just wait.
Oh my God. I need to my phone. This is very intense.
Too much pressure, too much intense pressure. There it is. Oh. It does the thing. I love it. Now, do we have sound with that, or it's just the light? You put, because I remember a video you put the sound to it, didn't you?
No.
When you did, no.
No, because the video you saw takes place in my kitchen, and what you're actually hearing there is like my refrigerator. Oh.
So everyone. Kitchen refrigerator sound like wood cores, apparently.
Yes. And it's like I wish I could bring it closer to the camera, but my computer is set and there's wires I don't want to mess up.
Yeah.
But remove it from its model and throw it in a trapdoor to explode it open. Yes, that is the plan. If there's ever like a fire at my house or anything like that, there's a window right over there. Then I just that's the plan. Yeah, that was a solid week of 3D printing. And I had to modify the model a little bit because it's a really well-made model, but there were some things about it that I felt like could be better. So I modified it a little bit, and I put LEDs in it, and it's there's an Arduino inside, which is a tiny little microcontroller that drives the LEDs, and I have it plugged into a smart plug, so I can use my phone to turn it on and off. It's very neat.
Nice. Is there anything else that you're planning on making coming up soon that you can divulge?
Let's see. Oh, I really want to model the phaser rifle, the specific phaser rifle that's in lower decks, because I think it's cool. It's close to the Nemesis phaser rifle, but it's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
So I want to model that, and I also want to model the big ass like chain gun bazooka thing that Shax uses in lower decks. I want to model that as well. And
I'm seriously just waiting for you to make a bat laugh.
Yeah, that too. I have tried to, because the shape of a batleth is weird and my printer is not that big, there's like I have to split it up in really kind of awkward ways to make it work. So that's a thing that
what
hopefully
about what's the official name for like the knife?
Oh, the daktach or the meklech.
Would that be easier?
Yes. Yeah. Although I'm thinking that I just want to buy like metal versions of those instead of 3D printing them. But also, and this is a completely separate topic, I'm also learning how to work with EVA foam, and making weapons out of foam is great too. And you can, if you make weapons out of foam, you can take them to conventions. Conventions don't like you taking the metal versions for understandable reasons.
Well, that's why like 3D printing is a good alternative, right? Because they will let you bring in 3D printed items instead of a metal item.
Hopefully. Because you can, if you know what you're doing, you can finish something and make it look 100% real when it's not. So yeah.
Oh, so because you did talk about a lot about finishing. Like, do you have a recommendation of either online?
Nikki froze.
Because I'm back.
Yeah, you froze. Yeah, you were asking about places online to buy things.
Like, yes. So all the stuff for finishing, whether it's like a hardware store.
Oh yeah. Normally I just buy everything from like Lowe's or Home Depot. Because they have, all the sandpaper, the primer, paint, all of that sort of stuff. I have just been using like Rust-Oleum primer, paint stuff. It's probably not like the super best, but it's good. And it's pretty reliable quality. So yeah, that's
our friend Faith has a question.
Yes. From a costuming point, the cost of a printed prop stacking up to other options. So 3D printing is not, it's not a wildly expensive hobby, but there is money you have to put into it. Like I said, the 3D printer that I have, I think at regular price is like $199, $189, something like that. And so that's not a wild amount of money, but that's also not nothing.
Right.
Filament, PLA filament for good stuff is like 25 or 30 bucks a roll. And if you're making smaller props like phasers and tricorders and stuff like that, that will pretty far. The big investment, honestly, with 3D printing and props is time. Because the prints take forever. Finishing takes a really long time, especially if you're doing like paint, primer, all of that, and you give it the time it needs to dry. Because you do a coat of primer to really do it properly. If you're going to sand it down and all of that, you want to let that dry for a day before you paint it. And if you paint, you make a mistake, sand the paint off, paint it again. So it's really just a time investment.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also makes sense that like I feel like if there's a unique item that just isn't available to purchase somewhere, or would be crazy expensive to like have somebody, contract somebody to make, that it would be it would be less expensive to just 3D print something like medical phaser.
Yep.
No one else has made.
For example, another plan that I have is I want to, and this is something my 3D design skills are not quite up to par with yet, but it's a goal, is I want to make Kalis' sex helmet, the fornication helmet from Lower Decks. So that's a thing that I want to make happen too. Handmade props also take many of these same time-consuming processes. Absolutely. It just kind of all depends on what you have access to and what you have the skills to use. Because 3D printing, if you know how to do like paint and sanding and all of that sort of stuff, you can kind of make it look like metalwork and woodwork and all of that stuff, right? There's some 3D printing filament that is that looks like wood. And you can also and you can finish in a way that makes it look like wood or makes it look like metal. And so whereas like if metalworking, there's a specific kind of prop you can make, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff you can't make. And with 3D printing, you can kind of do anything if you know a base few techniques and have some of that. So yeah. Well, it is 2 minutes till the end, and we should probably give folks some time to move on over to the next event. So, seventh rule, folks, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank
This
you.
was a blast. We love you dearly. And yeah, if you're going to be at Gallifrey 1, I probably won't be there myself, but we as a group will be. So you should come stop by the table, hang out, talk about queer stuff, talk about Doctor Who stuff. And in that case, Doctor Who's neat, but it's not my fandom. I don't know a ton about it, but there's queer stuff to be talked about in Doctor Who, I'm sure. And that's
yeah,
what
it's not really mine either, but I will say that's one of the conventions where it's more like, it seems like it's fan run. I don't know if it actually is, but it has a solid fan base where everybody comes back every year. So it's great. It always
nice.
Really, really nice, very welcoming, almost feels like family. So the few times I've gone to help with a bunch of different things, it's been really great. So
very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, friends. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.